All right, I want to thank you for joining us on another edition of The Agenda. Okay, you want to listen to people who talk passionately about what they believe in and about changing anomalies, talking about issues trending or happening within the Project Nigeria. This is the place. Now, recently, before I even go into the topic of today, first let me introduce myself. My name is Henry Williams. It's really great pleasure to be here with you today. Now, the procedure for awarding oil blocks in Nigeria has become urgent given the current controversy over which section of the country controls majority interest in the oil industry. Senator Itainan caused a stir during the Senate session on March 6, 2013, when he alleged that 83% of the oil blocks were owned by people from the northern part of the country. This, if true, could only have been possible in an atmosphere of arbitrariness, corruption, and lack of transparency. Experts have advised that decisions on how oil and gas licenses are allocated to companies need to be taken in a transparent, orderly method to remove any risk of conflicts of interest. These are the issues we hope to analyze in this edition of The Agenda. And it's against that backdrop that we will be setting the ball rolling. And with me to do that is a gentleman here with me on the show. Hello, sir. It's great to have you on the show. His name is Julius Gemomen. Okay, he's a managing director, brand life marketing consultant, and a social expert. Okay, and he's a public policy analyst too. So I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Well, it's a day of issues now. What we've been talking about so much, talking about Nigeria's oil block allocation and the regulatory controversies. Now, well-known Patutomi, Tomi-led coalition of the United Niger Delta Energy Development Security Front has urged the federal government to scrap ownership of oil blocks in Nigeria and begin at a 0 point to relocate them in the spirit of fairness and equity. Now, do you think this is a realistic demand coming from this body?
Thank you very much. I think before we actually answer that question, we should look at the history.
Okay.
Where are we coming from? We know that in 1956, that was when oil was first discovered at Loibiri. Okay. And Share BP then had a concession, and the first oil was was pumped out of this Nigerian soil in 1958. Okay. It was, of course, a prosperous business, and subsequently, a number of other foreign companies were concessioned to also lift oil. Now, in 1977, NNPC was established. Okay. And NNPC, of course, had a majority share in the downstream, and they also had 57% JV with other foreign companies on upstream. Okay. Now, talking specifically about oil block allocation, we can trace that to 1990 under the IBB regime, okay. Where he allocated oil blocks to a number of local companies or individuals. That pattern has continued, so to speak, because after IBB in 1993, Abacha did the same thing. Absalam came, he repeated the same thing. And before I moved to the Obasanjo government, the question was, who were the people who were being allocated these oil blocks? What were the rules set in place to ensure that there was fairness and justice to all? We can conclude that they were not transparent. You can rightly say that if you had a mistress and she was performing very well, she was entitled to an oil block. Okay. I mean, that was basically what was happening. Okay. When President Obasanjo came to power the second time, he tried to institute some level of transparency by a bidding process. But having said that, even though it was an improvement over what we had, there were also some loopholes over the issue of right of first refusal, okay. Which more or less created a number of issues. So there is a whole lot of issues with oil block allocation in Nigeria. It has not been transparent. It's been used basically as a patronage tool for
settlement of
absolutely
of
for friends, for relatives, for political associates. We know how that is in Nigeria. So going back to your question again, which is the issue of cancelling.
Cancelling it.
I think
a total.
Yeah, I think we Nigerians, we should be very careful. I mean, it's a beautiful statement to make, to say cancel all the oil block allocation because there has not been a lot of fairness in the past. However, like we know, during the Obasanjo regime, some level of fairness came in, but not completely transparent. It is not just an honorary policy issue for the Jonathan administration to come and say, look, we cancel all oil blocks that have been allocated in this country. It has grave political implications for the government. It can create a lot of instability. The people who have these oil blocks have a lot of money invested. And besides that, the issue is that the right thing to do, to simply cancel? Yes. If you want to be populist, you can't take such an action. But what I would say is Nigerians are not happy that there has not been fairness in the process of oil block allocation. It is unfair for a president to have the power to simply allocate oil block to whoever he wishes. And even with the current bidding process, a whole lot of abuses are there. But what we should do, rather than cancel the existing, is to say, can we not institute the right procedures to ensure going forward that there is no abuse of the process? There is fairness, there is justice to all those who are interested in allocation and to, if you like, to all sections of the country. That would be my position, not going back to cancel the existing oil block. It has a lot of implication, and we must be very mindful of that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Munaman. Well, before we go any further, let's take an interview, an ABN interview with an analyst on oil industry reforms based on foreign oil firms and ownership lease issues in Nigeria.
What has been put up for sale is the joint ownership in these concessions of Shell, Ajip, as well as Total. So essentially you have about 45% thereabouts of the interests belonging to the three players being sold. Then you have the NNPC on the other hand, holding 55% of the assets. NNPC, we have heard that NNPC has the right, clearly NNPC has the right to preempt these sales, but to the best of my knowledge, NNPC hasn't preempted any of the sales. And, I think the sales will go through, at least for now.
I want to talk about this liberalization that really would be manifest under the petroleum industry bill once it's passed. There is a huge emphasis right now in Nigeria on getting local ownership on the very strategic resource that is oil, which many Nigerians feel is their birthright. In the context of some of these reforms, it's also been said that authorities have urged companies to suspend any new programs that they'd be investing in so that ultimately the space starts to create entry for local companies. So in many ways, some could argue that there's a changing tide of liberalization and indigenization in Nigeria that's ultimately going to force a lot of the international oil companies to take a step back.
I think it's about time steps are being taken back. Essentially, the oil companies have quite a lot of assets, very small assets that really should, as the Nigerians say, should belong to them. So you have oil fields producing 10,000 barrels, 15,000 barrels, that the Nigerians could rightly claim to have the expertise to run. So I think you will find over the next couple of years, over the next 5 years in fact, that a lot of these fields are going to be transferred to the Nigerians, are going to be sold to Nigerians, and the IOCs are going to end up holding on to the big oil fields. So I don't think it's such a bad idea for Nigeria, quite honestly.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching The Agenda, and we had that report from ABN interview with an analyst on the oil industry reforms. Now, so what do you think about what the analyst said? Does it give any hope, concerning what we've been talking about?
No, I think I fully agree with him. There is absolutely no reason why Nigerians, more and more Nigerians, should not control the wealth of the nation. Okay. So in the next few years, that should happen, but it should happen under a regime of transparency. And that is the key issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
A regime of transparency. And that's what guest Julius Gemomen is saying, a regime of transparency. Well, before we go on, we have somebody else who just joined us in the fray who will be contributing to this very important discussion. His name is Barrister Emiyi Clement Ekpo. He's a legal practitioner, a public policy analyst. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Clement.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you on the show. Now, we've been talking about the issue of Nigeria's oil blocks, allocation and regulatory controversies. So much has been said about this, the anomaly in the system in awarding oil blocks to mostly, a report say, over 83% of oil blocks were owned by people from the northern part of the country. What's your take on this?
When you at the opening of your speech, you made mention of arbitrariness.
Yes, okay.
And the word is so catchy when you take into consideration the socio-economic environment of Nigeria and in perspective the political history of this country. You know that our country, after independence, we've been so misruled, unfortunately, by the military juntas. And when you talk about oil blocks and its allocation, you discover that apart from the foremost companies that were granted a license to prospect oil in Nigeria, when the military juntas came in, which is the regime within which you can begin to trace the arbitrary allocation of oil blocks to, you discover that they were not just allocating it arbitrarily, they were also strategically allocating it. And when we talked about 83% of oil blocks are allocated to the northerners, somehow it's interesting, it's good to hear, but somehow being a fair-minded person, I pause to ask, hey, come, these northerners that we're talking about, how many of the northerners are benefiting from or have benefited from this supposed allocation? You discover that it's just a few northerners, a few elites who have a link with those who have been in power. So, in other words, there's a secret, somewhat secret joint venture, a marriage of convenience between them, because you're linked to me either by virtue of marriage, political affiliation, or one form of connection or the other. You come and take it, so that by the time I get out of power, I can also benefit from it. And you can see it from all those who have it currently. You discover that they have had one form of relationship with a military head of state or the other. And so it is within them, their companies, that have become primary beneficiaries. So that word is captured it all. Okay. The allocation of oil blocks in Nigeria has been characterized by sheer arbitrariness.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ekpo. Now, for the record, we know that Department of Petroleum Resources has contested that figure of the 83% being allocated to the North. Well, they're yet to give us enough proof, to believe otherwise. Right. Now, that brings me to my question, that do you think that the issue of transparency here is a major key concern? If these oil blocks, and shouldn't the public have the right to know who are the people that own them? Mr. Gemomen, please.
Well, I think it's interesting, the statement DPR made, and it's most unfortunate. What the guy said is they have no record of. What do they have record of? Do they not have record of the owners of oil blocks in Nigeria? They do. An allegation has been made that 83% of the oil blocks belong to northerners. So if DPR, that is repository, that is the regulatory authority, in respect of this, and we believe they have all the information, let them come out and publish the list of all the owners of oil blocks in Nigeria. That is a very simple way of allaying the fears of Nigerians to say, look, listen, there has been fairness. It's not 83% to Northerners. It's probably 56 or 60, or it's even more to the Southerners. So long as that has not been done, I think that information is correct. But please, let's note something significant. A few days or a day after the allegation was made on the floor of the Senate, we recall clearly there was a lot of opposition by Northern senators on key provisions of the PIB. That was when the issue came up. Once this allegation was made, or once this information was disclosed to the public, there was a change of position by the Northern senators. The day or 2 days after, they went along with the bill, and the bill moved to the next stage. What do you really get out of that? It means there is substance to that allegation, and the onus is on DPR to publish for the Nigerian peoples to see themselves who are the owners of these oil blocks. But let's leave whether they publish or not. Nigerians are aware of the people who own the oil blocks. Names are being mentioned every day.
Yes, sir.
The owners have not come forward to say, sorry, I don't have oil block. And from the list we know, like one analyst said, you have discovered that virtually nobody from the Niger Delta, where the oil actually comes from, has an oil block. So I think we need some, the government is being unfair, and we expect a whole lot of openness from this government. This is not the kind of controversy that the federal government should just keep quiet and say, let it go. What is the truth concerning this issue of lopsided allocation of oil blocks? Is it true that the northern political leaders that have led us over the period simply allocated oil blocks mostly to their kids and kin and mistresses and political associates? Is it true? We need to know the truth, and we deserve to know the truth.
Okay. It is very clear the significance and how crucial oil is in terms of the in the power play, because we're talking about the resource of the nation, the major, resource of the nation here, that fund generator for the nation. But before we go into that, Mr. Ekbo, in response to what Mr. Agemomen has said, I want to quote the director of DPR, Mr. Austin Olorunshola, who says that he has stated that the federal government does not allocate oil blocks and marginal fields to individuals and corporations based on region or where they come from, and added that it has no records of 83% northern ownership of oil blocks anywhere. Now, what is your view on this statement now?
And it's correct. Looking at it officially, if it were to be, the federal government, I do not think, there was a question that he answered that this matter goes beyond the mere allocation to personalities. You're talking about, when you're talking about scrapping or cancellation of it, you're going down, it's a fundamental issue. You know that you want to nullify a policy. It's a regime. It's a government, and you know that government carries, it's a collective responsibility, and you inherit it. So if you're saying that you should scrap it or you should cancel it, which means the policy that instituted it or that allocated it, you're faulting it, so you're asking it to be nullified. So that is aside. I think we can have remedial, like he said, we can have remedial measures to that effect. But going back to the question, ordinarily, on the face value, I do not think that the federal government intends to allocate or bring in federal character into the allocation of oil blocks. I believe they do it to whosoever is competent, capable, who has the wherewithal to prospect. I believe they suppose ordinarily, if you going by the certain rules, we believe that should be the parameters.
Merit.
A merit basis, the parameters they will consider, not because you're coming from the south or from the north or from the west. Well, that being the case, I believe that if he will be pressed further, he will he can provide detailed information as to beneficiaries of oil blocks, not necessarily from where they are coming from within the country. I believe where they are uncomfortable is where we are blanketing or attempts being made to categorize within the geopolitical zones where the beneficiaries or the major beneficiaries are coming from. That's where they are making effort to see how they can cover up, to say in our records we do not have details as to Mr. A, the beneficiary comes from the north of Castina, Mr. B came from Bauchi, Mr. C came from Niger. What they have is corporations or persons who have applied are Nigerians. They may partner with foreign bodies to do so, but they do not have this categorization based on regions where they come from within the country. I want to believe so, and I do not think they will shy away from providing detailed information. I believe when Bush comes to shove, that can be provided, particularly with the fact that we now have the Freedom of Information Act. And matters of public concern, when it comes to that point, I believe they can be pressed, and they have no obligation, no other option but to oblige the public with those information.
So you're saying right now there's no attempt to hoodwink the public on this issue, on who are the real owners of these oil blocks?
I believe there had not been. When that is made public and official, when that demand
is made, and the demand has not been made so far.
I think I completely disagree. Since March 6th, that allegation was made. It's a very weighty allegation. There have been calls made by different individuals.
And names have been mentioned.
And names have been mentioned. And the DPR guy, Mr. Olorum, what is his name? He came up to say he has no record. DPR has no record. That is a categorical statement made by him. What do you understand by that statement? Well, DPR has no record. If DPR has no record, who has the record? If the record is not 83%, what is the percentage? Is it 50%? Nigerians deserve to know. So I completely disagree that he's not trying to shy away from answering the questions. Yes, individuals or groups can make requests based on the Freedom of Information Bill, but why wait for that? Let him tell Nigerians, let the federal government tell Nigerians the list of owners of the oil blocks. And of course, you can tell where they are coming from. Like I said earlier, I do not subscribe that the current oil blocks should be cancelled. It will not be a wise political move. It cause a whole lot of problems. I'm very mindful of that. So I'm not trying to grandstand here.
But at least there should be a sort of screening.
Absolutely. But going forward, for me, is the key thing. You talked about the issue of federal character. You see, federal character is nice, but I don't think that is how we should do business in this country. I am not necessarily saying that if you do a new round of oil allocation, a competitive oil allocation, and you have more people coming from the north, you should not give it to them. So let's be very clear. It has nothing, competence has nothing to do with federal character. If you are competent and you have the wherewithal to own and bring value to the nation, whether you come from the south or the north, from Sokoto or Bayelsa or from wherever, you have the chance and the opportunity to have it, but it must be competitive and transparent. I think that is the key thing. I do not subscribe to the federal character thing in allocating.
Don't you think preference should be given to to those who reside where the resource is being drawn
So
from?
when preference is given, so you just allocate it to them, and what do they do with it? Because one other information we have is that a whole lot of people have these oil blocks. What do they do with it? They sell it to people and just pocket the money, and that is it. That's not, we want value to be given to the Nigerian nation. And it's not just a question of satisfying a primordial or some federal character issues in this country. I think it must be truly competitive bidding, and all the processes and procedures must be truly clear to everybody. Because right now the issue is that, yes, It's supposed to be an open bidding process, but it is not completely transparent.
All right, it's not completely transparent. That's what Ms. Agemomen says. But let's look at some figures now, because figures will give us a better idea. And then I would let Mr. Ekwa respond to this. Now, the Department of Petroleum Resources, DPR, has added that Nigerians currently own 52% of the 173 active blocks, while foreign oil companies own 48%. Now, do you think these figures tally the realities on ground?
If that's what is coming from them, like he said, and they have a defense, a supposed defense, that they do not have records as to what is being alleged. See, I am not totally aligning myself with the fact that he may not have the records. No, he had the record, but this is Nigeria, where even contracts, when you go to the Ministry of Works or Minister of War, or if you demand, they will blatantly tell you they do not have certain information within the nose of his ministry. But when certain lawful procedures are followed and he's under pressure, he will produce them. Now, these figures that has been published goes to show that in actual fact, we did the DPR, which of course you should know that it's ridiculous for one to come out and claim they do not have record as to true beneficiaries of oil blocks. Otherwise, how did they filter out those who benefited from it, who are Nigerians, and those who are foreigners in it? That alone goes ahead to throw back the question to him that you're not being true. And I know that, you know, not just to sit down here and say it, or a journalist to put it to him, that you have complicated yourself, or yes, contradicted yourself, because you say you claim not to have records, and yet you have record of both foreigners and Nigerians who owns it. What is? But I feel that the best thing that we could do, instead of politicalizing it, a procedure, the rightful procedure, because if you want to meet them and demand for it, you will not get it. Then file an application to them and demand that they should publish it. In that case, they will not flaunt it, because if it is, because it appears that Nigerians, we are getting to the point where, since we are